There's a place on this planet where you're not allowed to go, not because of fences or signs or security guards, but because if you step onto that island, you probably won't come back. Just a stretch of jungle in the Indian Ocean where the people who live there, if they see you, will shoot to kill. In 2018, John Allen Chow tried. He was 26, a missionary. He believed it was his calling to bring the gospel to the people of North Sentinel Island. Somehow, he made it to shore. No one knows what happened next, but the fishermen who brought him there saw his body being dragged through the sand by the natives, roped, lifeless, disappearing into the trees. And yet, as shocking as his death was, it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Not even close. And that's what this video is about. It's about the place, the island itself. Because long before Chow ever showed up, North Sentinel had made its decision. No outsiders, no contact, no exceptions. And for over 100 years, they've made sure of it. North Sentinel Island isn't big. It's about 23 square miles, roughly the size of Manhattan. But unlike Manhattan, there are no roads, no maps, no lights at night. Just dense jungle, wild coastline, and a reef that keeps most boats from ever getting close. There's no port, no place to dock. And if you even try, the island lets you know real fast you're not welcome. It sits in the Bay of Bengal as part of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a whole chain of islands owned by India. But Sentinel is the one that remains off limits, not just by law, though the government has banned outsiders, but by the will of the people who live there. No one really knows how many there are. Some reports say maybe 50, others say a few hundred, but no one's been close enough or long enough to count. They're believed to be related to the Jarawa and Onge tribes who live on nearby islands. But even they can't understand the Sentinelese language. It's completely unique, like everything else about them. We don't know what they call themselves. We don't know what they believe in. We don't even know how they see the world beyond their shores, or if they care to see it at all. What we do know is this. They've been here a long, long time. Anthropologists say the Sentinelese have lived in isolation for over 60,000 years, longer than any other group of people, anywhere on Earth, still living on their original land. And somehow, they've managed to keep it that way. This wasn't a one-time thing. The Sentinelese didn't just wake up one day and decide they didn't want visitors. They've been saying no for centuries. The first time anyone in the Western world noticed the island was in 1771. An East India Company surveyor passed by and saw faint lights glowing in the trees. That's it. No landing, no contact, just a quiet, distant glow. And the ship moved on. Nearly a century later, in 1867, a merchant ship called the Nineveh ran aground on the reef. Dozens of passengers and crew made it to the beach. They were stranded there for days. And then the arrows came. No words, no warnings. Just the message the Sentinelese have always sent. Leave. In 1880, things escalated. A British colonial officer named Maurice Vidal Portman arrived with a crew. They found the villages abandoned. The people had vanished inland, but 6 had stayed behind. An elderly couple and 4 children. Portman took them, kidnapped them. Within days, the elders were dead, most likely from disease. The children were sent back with gifts, sick, weak, and carrying illnesses their community had never seen before. After that, the Sentinelese stopped hiding. They defended their beach. And over time, more people tried and failed to get close. In the 1970s, Indian anthropologist Triloknath Pandit began visiting the island by boat. They came with gifts, coconuts, metal pots, sometimes candy. Sometimes the villagers stood in silence. Other times, they raised weapons. Turns out the Sentinelese had preferences. They liked coconuts, which don't grow on the island. They liked metal tools, but pigs, they speared them and buried them. Plastic, same treatment, straight into the sand. There was one moment in 1991 that stood out. A Sentinelese man raised his bow, aiming at the visitors. But then, a woman stepped in. She gently pushed the bow down. The man knelt, buried the bow in the sand, and walked away. Was it a ritual, a warning, a sign of trust? No one really knows. But the message stayed the same. Keep your distance. Even after the 2004 tsunami, when the Indian Coast Guard flew over the island to check for survivors, the villagers were fine. And they fired arrows at the helicopter. In 2006, 2 fishermen drifted too close. They were killed. Their bodies were buried on the beach, just like Chow's would be, years later. John Allen Chow had been thinking about this island for years, not just as a place on a map, but as a mission. He wasn't just a traveler or a thrill seeker. He was a trained missionary, part of an evangelical group in the U.S. He even attended what they called boot camp, where other missionaries acted out scenes in mock villages, pretending to be hostile tribes, waving fake spears. Chow wrote in his journal that North Sentinel was, in his words, Satan's last stronghold, a place untouched by the gospel, and therefore, in his view, in need of saving. But he wasn't naive about the risk. He wrote, "I don't want to die." He knew what might happen. Still, he moved forward. In late 2018, Chow traveled to Port Blair, and from there paid 2 local fishermen around $400 to quietly take him as close to the island as they could. He also brought gifts with him, like fish, a waterproof Bible, picture cards, and medical supplies. The first time he approached, the islanders shouted and fired arrows. One of them hit his Bible right through the cover. He turned back. But the next day he returned again. And then, on November 17th, he told the fishermen to leave. He said he'd be fine staying overnight, that he needed to go alone. The next morning, as their boat drifted by in the distance, they saw his body, dragged across the beach, tied by rope, disappearing into the trees. After Chow's death, the Indian Coast Guard sent a helicopter to survey the island from above. They hovered just close enough to see the shoreline, and there they were, a small group of islanders, standing on the beach, watching the sky. Bows in hand, silent, still. They didn't shoot, not right away, but the message was obvious. Do not land. The helicopter turned around. Meanwhile, back on the mainland, the people who had helped Chow get to the island, the fishermen, the contact who arranged it, they were all taken in by police, arrested for breaking laws that were put in place to protect the island and its people. For a few days, there were talks, quiet ones, discussions about whether they could send someone in to retrieve Chow's body. Maybe someone trained, maybe at night, maybe by sea. But those conversations didn't last long, because others, especially those who had spent years studying the island from a distance, stepped in. Survival International, a group that advocates for tribal rights, was one of the first to speak out. They urged the Indian government to stop, not just to protect the Sentinelese from disruption, but because even a single encounter, just a few minutes of contact, could be catastrophic for a community with no immunity to modern diseases. Something as common as the flu could tear through their population with no way to fight back. In the end, Indian authorities made a choice. They backed off. Not because they were afraid, but because for once, someone listened. Chow's body is still there, buried somewhere in the sand. And for now, maybe forever, that's where it will stay. It's easy to label the Sentinelese as hostile, to look at what happened and say they're violent or dangerous. But look closer, and the pattern tells a different story. Every time someone from the outside has reached that island, what followed was either violence, disease, or death. The British came with soldiers and handcuffs. They kidnapped elders, took children, and left behind illnesses that killed. Anthropologists followed with gifts, but their escorts looted the islanders' homes, took tools, took bows, left nothing in return. Even now, people approach with cameras, or with sermons, or with curiosity, but rarely with permission. And yet, for a group so fiercely private, they don't live in chaos. They bury their dead. They tend their fires. They build their huts in patterns, not piles. They fish. They craft weapons. They salvage shipwreck metal and shape it into something useful. They are not lost, and they are not primitive. They're survivors. And maybe their so-called hostility isn't about hate or fear. Maybe it's just protection, because history has taught them exactly what happens when outsiders arrive. The truth is, we still don't even know what they call themselves. We don't know their language. We don't know their stories. We don't know what they believe, what they dream about, or what they're afraid of. And maybe after all this time, after centuries of ignoring that message, the most human thing we can do is finally listen. Now, if this story pulls you in, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. We've got more stories like this coming over the next few days. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and take care.